Hello, and welcome to the Envision Speaker Series. I am your host, Dr. Keith McNally. My vision is to bring industry leaders together at the table to discuss psychological and emotional well-being. With each episode, I want to change the conversation around mental health. Working together, I believe we can make this change happen. So please join me in these conversations and let's make change happen. Thank you. So welcome everybody to the first episode of the Envision Speaker Series. I am your host, Dr. Keith McNally. I created the Envision Speaker Series with two things in mind. First, I wanted to change the conversation around mental health and psychological well-being. And two, I wanted to remove the stigma associated with that conversation. My vision is to bring professionals, as you see before you, to the table to take a deep dive into specific topics associated with mental health and our emotional well-being. Now, with that in mind, this is the disclaimer. These are not conversations around mental illness. Neither I nor anybody in my panel will be ever credentialed to either treat or diagnose any mental illness. This is about conversations on health, mental health, and how to stay and be healthy. With that, I also want to add that these conversations, and especially this conversation here, may trigger some emotional or psychological responses in our audience. If you feel that you are going to be triggered by anything that we say because of the nature of the topic, stop watching, stop listening, or bring a friend in, or if need be, contact crisis intervention if that's the case. Otherwise, please enjoy the conversation wherever you are in the world. Before we begin, let me introduce today's panel members. I'm going to start with Cheyenne Kramer. Cheyenne is co-founder of the We Care Partnerships Network, a network of small business owners dedicated to building communities that provide good health, prosperity, and peace for all. After losing several friends to suicide and experiencing serious bouts of depression in her life, Cheyenne has spent considerable time researching the key components of body, mind, and spirit that contribute to depression. She is an advocate for finding complementary modalities that can help people return to living a life with more joy and more peace of mind. Next is Dory Staley. Dory is the owner of Next Stage Drumming and the one and only certified drum therapist in North Carolina. She is also an inspirational speaker, percussionist, author, and mentor. A freak accident in 2011 caused Dory to discover how to use drumming to boost both mental and physical health. She has since helped thousands of kids and adults focus, feel better, and find their joy. Next, I have Jerry Klingerman. After nearly 40 years of working as a writer, editor, and self-employed publisher, Jerry Klingerman has turned his communication and observation skills toward helping men maximize their relationships. A corporate escapee, his own words, Jerry has written several books and created and launched a handful of successful magazines. And then he added, there's a couple that tanked as well. Jerry's newest book is titled Reclaiming Masculinity: How to Be a Man in the 21st Century. The book, which will be available later this year, 2023, is based on his observations, research, and opinions about the current state of the American male 50 years after the rise of the modern feminist movement. A lifelong Ohioan, is that a word, Jerry? Jerry
It is.
recently relocated to the Atlanta, Georgia area and is enjoying a snow-free lifestyle. He is available for speaking engagements as well as individual coaching. Mitch Gray. As a spiritual guide life and leadership coach, inspirational speaker, and writer, Mitch Gray teaches us to live and lead from the depth of our humanity. Over the past 25 years, Mitch has coached over 10,000 leaders and individuals worldwide while leading organizations across 7 different industry sectors. Mitch's personal journey of living with severe depression disorder, PTSD, and bipolar disorder have inspired him to focus on shifting the conversation around mental health in the workplace and communities. Mitch is the author of several books, including The Gathering Place and How to Hire and Keep Great People. He is also the host of The Mitch Gray Show podcast, available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you all for being with me today. I'm really excited to get this conversation started. I can't even talk. Let's get this conversation started. Let's start with Cheyenne. Cheyenne, I know you've got some stories to tell me, but first, really, it's your backstory. How and why is the conversation around suicide so important to you?
Oh, that's a great question, Keith. And, for me, I hate to say it, but it started as far back as high school. I lost my first close friend to suicide when I was still in high school. And as a result of that, that started me thinking. I was actually valedictorian in my high school class, and I decided that my valedictory speech needed to be on the subject of following your heart. And the reason for that was because after I had lost that one friend, I had found that a lot of my close friends were getting ready to leave high school and go study in things in college that they weren't necessarily excited about doing. One of those friends actually told me right up front, he felt called to be moving in the direction of going into ministry, and he was talked into by a lot of well-meaning people going into accounting. And he was a darn good accountant, but I can tell you that he spent a lot of his years being depressed because he wasn't doing what his heart was kind of guiding him in the direction of. And I ended up losing him a few years ago as well. So there's been too much of that whole concept of suicide in my life. I lost a couple of other friends over the last 10 to 15 years as well. And for me, it caused me to reflect and just go, okay, so because I've been through several serious bouts of depression, and more often than not, for me, those times of severe depression, except for one, were usually around career-oriented things. Going through a layoff, trying to figure out, do I want another job that looks like the last one? And just trying to get closer to the idea of, is it possible for us to connect our head and our heart and build an income around it instead of just trying to follow the latest trends and follow the money trail? I think that's becoming more important. And I love to tell the story of the very first gentleman I worked with to help him connect his head and his heart in his career path. Because this was a gentleman who was a software quality engineer. I was at the time in Raleigh, North Carolina, and software positions are plentiful. And this gentleman had been unemployed for 18 months, and he was getting pretty depressed as a result of it. I happened to be a recruiter at the time, and I'm looking at his resume and I'm going, okay, so you've got a stellar resume, an incredible background in software quality. He had a pleasing personality. He was very relationship oriented and did a great job with people. I said, there's no logical reason that you've been unemployed for 18 months. And he's like, yeah, I know. And so I said, so let's get illogical. I said, what's hiding in your closet that you have something here that's important to you that you're hiding in that closet? And his face literally turned red, and he looked at me and said, how do you know what's in my closet? I said, I don't. I'm asking. And it didn't take him long to respond. And his response was all about his guitar.
Ooh,
And I asked him, I said, How long has it been since your guitar saw the light of day?" And he said, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it. It's been about 10 years. I said, 10 years? And you just got done telling me you love to sing, you love to play, you love to write your own music, you like to perform for people. What the heck are you waiting for? Go get that guitar out of the closet and see what happens. Because it was obvious talking to him. He had a huge heart around playing that guitar, but 10 years of not paying attention?
yeah.
This is one of the arenas where I think at the spiritual level, the soul level, that we can become self-sabotaging. And that's what I felt for this gentleman. And so he did. He did what I asked him. He went home, and that night he dug in the closet and he found that guitar and he dusted it off. And his instructions were, see
Wait,
what
wait,
you're
wait.
in.
You gave him instructions?
I did give him
Oh my
instructions.
gosh. Well, what were these instructions?
I said, when you take that guitar out, see what you're inspired to do with it. And the inspiration that came was that he called his church and asked the minister if he could get on the schedule to be able to play for the congregation, because he knew that was going to force him to practice.
Wow.
And the minister agreed. And interestingly enough, within 3 days, he got a call out of the blue from a company that he had never heard of. The company didn't even know how he'd gotten his resume. But he said, "But you know what? We're a startup company, so we're not surprised that you haven't heard of us before. But we want you to come today and interview. Can you do that?"
Wow.
And he's like, "Well, yeah." And he went, and he was given a job offer on the spot.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. That is an amazing story.
So yeah, depression gone.
I can imagine, having regained a job, having regained the passion for playing and being able to play. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Mitch, that
absolutely.
sounds like something closely associated with things that you think about and do. Am I right?
I'm
Gotta
all
gotta
about
gotta, gotta find the mute button.
going for it.
Yes.
There you go. Yep, living your song, that's what I call it. And, for me, that has been the big aha that I love to share with people is, even though he may not have, now he may have gotten paid by the church, I don't know, but even though he may not have been using that guitar to go create income, it had somehow become a stumbling block for him that was causing him to not have the job and to become very depressed as a result of it. So that's my hope for everybody, is that, just understand that there is a connection between our heads and our hearts that needs to be honored. And sometimes that may have something to do with how you're feeling.
Hmm.
Food for thought.
Mitch?
Yeah. That's first of all a great story. I relate to it incredibly well as a guitar player, singer, songwriter, and as someone who has gone twice in my life without being able to find work. And it's like the answers are you're either overqualified or don't have the right qualifications, and it's like whatever. Okay, so yeah, I get it. And Shine, I think you're onto something before we move on to someone else, Steve. Uh, there is this idea, and I know Jerry's going to speak specifically to men. I'm going to say in the modern world, um, especially for men, but I think in the modern world in general, we tend to live so much shoulder up in our heads, per se. And for men specifically, there is often, back years ago when I was a nonprofit where we did mental health coaching for marginalized teens. We often did this kind of game. It was called Boy in the Box. And I've actually used it on adults as well and called it Human in the Box. And basically it's you tape off a box on the floor and You ask questions such as, when you were a boy, were you told not to cry? When you were a boy, were you called a pansy or a wuss if you cried, if you showed emotion? And, we're dealing at that point in time with 15 to 18-year-old boys. And it was always so alarming and eye-opening to have a group of 20 boys year after year, month after month, who would step into the box when you ask them questions about emotional capacity, about crying or not crying, about being spanked, or other physical abusive remedies that many of us grew up with. And where I'm going with that is, across the board, gender wise, we're often taught cultural expectation. Unfortunately, oftentimes that cultural expectation that if you're a female and you show emotion, you're automatically a bitch. Or if you're a guy and you show emotion, you're automatically a pansy. Don't run like a girl, don't act like a girl. And we're becoming more aware of those statements now. But what we've completely missed, Cheyenne, to your point, is how that forces us to spiritually and emotionally decapitate ourselves to where we only live from the head up, and we completely suppress and repress from the heart down. But here's what we do know medically, scientifically, spiritually, emotionally, and that is the body, the soul, the heart, the mind are meant to work in perfect synchronicity. And so they are always telling each other stories. And the stories that the body, the heart, the soul, and mind tell each other are truths. It's just that we're taught to believe that they're mythological. And for a man, that may look like, well, I'm not supposed to cry. So we suppress, suppress, suppress. In the career field, Cheyenne, to what the great story you were sharing, we're taught in modern world that if you don't have a normal job, then you're less than. And so we began wrapping these packages of unworthiness on ourselves. And I think what we're talking about is the unfortunate expectation that we give to others and to ourselves. And really, at the end of the day, our body, minds, hearts, and souls are telling the truth. It's just that we often don't listen. And that becomes the discombobulation of our existence. And it's very dangerous and leads to the things that we're talking about today.
So let me go ahead and change the conversation just a little bit, because Dory's been on my podcast twice, not this podcast. She's been on the Question Guy podcast because just really, I love her energy. I mean, she always comes with energy. And I always say the non-caffeinated kind, because it takes a lot of energy to play a musical instrument. Now, I know Mitch would concur. Dory is a drummer, but she's a drum therapist, and she knows the power of healing through drumming. And I want Dory to talk about that if she could.
Sure, Keith. Well, a lot of people don't associate drumming, of all things, it's loud and all that, as something that can be used as a healing modality, but it is completely science-based. There's so much research behind this and established protocols. It's ridiculous, but you really have to experience it to get it. And a lot of people I've worked with, especially men, are very tentative at first because they realize, oh, we're going deep here because I say things while we're drumming. And I remember one gentleman, we were drumming together and he was just starting to open up. And I saw he dropped a tear out of his eye and he got really uncomfortable. I said, are you okay? He says, no. I said, why not? He goes, I don't know what's happening. I said, don't worry, it's all good. You're releasing. He, like others on the panel have mentioned, he had lost his job. He was trying to start a business. It wasn't taking off yet. He was embarrassed because, if you're not making money, and how does this, represent yourself to other people? And what about my family? He was worried about a lot of things. So I was trying to get him to drum and release and tell him it's going to be okay. You're going to get through this. We've all been through rough patches. I was telling him about my job stories, a lot of different careers and things like that, and how people used to make fun of me, actually. Drumming, Dory, really? You've got an MBA. What the heck are you doing with this drumming thing? You should be a business coach. You should be doing this. Like, I was in corporate for many years. It's really not my thing. Like the gentleman that Cheyenne was mentioning, when you give up something you're really passionate about and you put it on the back burner, it's really, really hard to stuff that down for so many years. So I was, letting things, flow with this gentleman and just showing him the healing power of drumming and how easy it is. And sometimes you just got to hit that thing. Don't hold back. None of this. If you're angry and you're frustrated, hit it like you mean it. You're not going to hurt the drum at all. And so, he gradually became more comfortable with me when he realized that, it's okay to not be okay. You get through it. Let's just see what we can do to help, open up your neural pathways, first of all, because there's a lot of brain science behind this. Get rid of the static in the attic, as I call it, all those worried, anxious thoughts. What if, what if, what if? I'm like, well, let's start thinking about good possibilities. What if something positive really came out of this? Let's start brainstorming and think. And we're drumming and talking at the same time. So I've been with a lot of people who have not, or who are not in a very good place, anxiety, stress, depression, or whatever. And once they experience the joy and the healing power of drumming and how stress just melts off your body. I'm not talking about a drum set, people. I use hand drums and the person sits across from me.
Do you have one in front
Oh,
of
as a
you?
matter of fact, I have drums in every room. Yes. So yeah, this is a small one, which happens
Okay.
to match my outfit, but but I use a larger one, and we'll just. Oh, it's so empowering, I'm telling you. And male or female, it doesn't matter. But I don't want anybody to feel stuck, scattered, or stressed out. And I don't want anyone to give up, because I was almost there. Cheyenne doesn't know this, but maybe she does. She's on the call now. She's going to hear it. One of the reasons why I bounced back, I said, because if I don't, Cheyenne is going to, she'll never forgive me. She's lost so many friends. She might have yelled at me. I don't know. But sometimes it takes a little bit of tough love to get somebody to pull you out of the funk and let you know of the gifts that God gave you. And you have a purpose. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Make your mess your message. You can move forward. I did it,
Ooh.
and you can too.
Say that again. Make your
mess your message.
I love it.
Bless others. Once you get through it, you can help lead others to their breakthrough as well. So
I got to ask, Cheyenne, would you have yelled at her if she did something stupid?
she would have.
Well, see, Dory actually took my class. So, and this was right after her accident. So yeah, I recognized her special nature very quickly. So I might have.
Well, good. I do want to switch the conversation to Jerry. Jerry, you're writing a book, and so you're inclined to talk to, well, based on our conversation on the Question Guide podcast, you are talking to everybody but the men who you're trying to focus on, because you're getting the collateral damage that's going on in relationships. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I'll start with the basic premise of the book, and that is that as we have very rightly brought women up in our world, and they are achieving things that they always should have had, I believe men are being marginalized. Men and in particular boys and young men are being marginalized. We're just not celebrating young men and boys in our society today. And the book is going to be about how grown men can reclaim some of just what they naturally are, if that makes sense. And I always preface this with a huge disclaimer. This is not about being a chest thumping, testosterone driven person in any respect. It's just about being who we are. But I want to just take a sidestep here. One thing that I've noticed so far in the discussion is that everybody who has spoken has talked about something that I also will talk about, and that is the fact that a lot of men, especially as they get toward middle age, and the middle age group is the biggest at-risk group here, and I'll get to that in a moment. But everybody has talked about how men seem to derive their sense of self-worth and purpose from their occupation, from what they do. When you meet somebody, you exchange pleasantries, and very soon in the conversation is like, what do you do? And in a sense, that is, that's where we derive our self-worth. And I think in terms of our conversation today and things that I'm writing about, when men starting about age 45 or so, when they start to evaluate their life thus far, I think that's where things can break down for them. If they haven't achieved what they want to achieve, maybe they're realizing that, hey, I'm not ever going to be a VP of a Fortune 500 corporation, or I don't have the wealth that I thought I would have or should have at this point. I think that's where things start to break down for them. So, and I was very interested to hear virtually everybody so far touch on that. I think one of the things that happens to men is they don't realize that they do matter, and then they do have worth that is totally detached from their occupation or their prevention or their profession rather. And if it's okay with you, Keith, I'd like to tell a quick story about that.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, a number of years ago, I was living in Columbus, Ohio, and I would commute back and forth to my hometown area, which is not far from where Cheyenne is now. And I would go to men's meetings. A group of churches would get men together and share a meal and then share what we in Ohio call a program. And I was in a little town called Glenmont, Ohio, which is technically in Appalachia. Had the meal, and I will state as a fact that food does in fact taste better in church basements. And then we went upstairs and we had the program, and the keynote speaker, I have no idea what his name was at the time, or now rather. The keynote speaker talked about a man who was feeling detached from his children, and he just didn't know how to reach out to his son in particular. And one night at bedtime, he just simply went into his son's room and he said to him, "Son, I just want you to know that I love you." And his son broke down in tears, and through tears began to explain to his father how he had quite literally planned to take his own life the next day. And I tell this as a story of celebration for the fact that the man was able to reach out to his son and reach him, but also to let men know that they do matter. And you might not ever understand how you affect other people. You might not see it. You probably don't see it, especially if you're having these kinds of feelings, but everyone in their own way does matter and does affect other people. And you matter. In fact, you might matter to people you haven't even met yet.
Ooh, I never thought about that. And I think you have a point. Well, and I do appreciate that story. So out of
Thank you.
curiosity, when is your book coming out?
I am shooting before the end of the year. I had a business opportunity come up that I wasn't expecting. It kind of sidetracked me, but I'm back on track. That's why I've been traveling so much back to Ohio recently. But I'm shooting to have it done by the end of the year. I am very excited about it because I love these conversations. They're conversations that need to happen. And I will say this. I've talked to a lot of different people of all ages, but especially like millennial age people and millennial age women. And when I mention the title of the book, you can see maybe a little bit, but as I explain things, I've never, ever to this day had anybody give me any negative pushback. Mostly what I'm getting from women is, yes, please write this, because I will state as a fact that even strong women want strong men in their lives. And they just, everybody just wants men to be able to be men.
Perfectly said. And that leaves us with Mitch Gray.
Thank you.
Mitch, we're coming back to you. As your bio says, a spiritual leader or a spiritual coach, or tell me what's going on with you.
Found the mute button again, so I know where that's at. I do want to say we are getting some really great engagement on LinkedIn. So I've been doing my best to multitask and listen to everyone. That is how I function as a spiritual guide, is do the small things and make sure they push forward. So anyway, yeah, Keith, first of all, thank you for bringing this team together. You and I've worked together for, gosh, what, a few years now? It's been a while. And the one thing I can definitely say about you is you always seem to summon the courage to take action. And that is that is a badge of honor, my friend. So kudos again for starting this and summoning that courage. Yeah, I'll go back a little bit to my beginning. Again, a similar thread to the story that Cheyenne told earlier. Since I was 10 years old, all I wanted to do was be a preacher. That was it. I didn't want to do anything else. I set off.
When you were 10?
I was 10. I
Oh
was
my
10
God.
years old. Felt like God spoke to me and said, this is what you're going to do. And I did that for a while. Went to seminary and got my degree in divinity and worked in churches for a while. Got fired twice.
Wait. Stop. You're going too fast.
Well, I got to give my
God
story.
calls
You
you
only,
at
you
10
only
and
gave
you
me
were
3
fired
minutes.
by what?
You said I only have 4 minutes. So I'm
No, I
trying to
didn't,
get.
but
Okay, go ahead. Just kidding.
wait, you were called by God at 10 to be
Yeah,
a preacher, and
yeah.
then man fired you from a preaching job?
Yeah, so I got fired twice.
Oh my
Once
gosh.
in youth ministry, and then once as I was a senior pastor.
So are you sure you heard God right?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, I've since moved away from religion and Christianity completely. That was the best path for me, the most healing path. The interesting thing is, I get to impact people now at levels and in places and spaces that I never would have had the opportunity to impact working in churches. And that means a lot to me. So I actually think I'm more of a pastor now than I ever was before. And so kind of to the point, and Cheyenne alluded to this a little bit, and Jerry did too. You know, we often find so much identification in our careers. In fact, we all ask the single worst question. And Jerry said this, if you didn't catch it. When we meet someone new, we ask the single worst question we could ever ask. And that is, what do you do? And it's like the second single worst question we ask is, how are you? And it's like, you know, I don't know about all of you. I have a gut feeling is we all like to swim in the deeper waters of life. And so I like to ask strange questions like, how's your soul today? And really freak people out. You know, when you're in line at Walmart, you ask the cashier that. It's like, whoa, hang on. But there is this idea and illusion that we find our identity in our careers and how much money we make and our status symbols. And many of us like to say there's not, but you know, we all have our possessions that we love and the things we love to do. And when we tie that to income, it does kind of become a part of our identity. For me, that was the case. The downside to receiving a message from the universe deep within your DNA as a child that you know what you're supposed to do in life is that that does become your identity. And what I've learned through a lot of really dark battles is no matter how great the calling is, and no matter how true your DNA and passion may be, we are worthy of existence even outside of that. And that is something that we often miss. I am worthy because I exist, not because of what I do, not because of what I say, not because of what I believe or don't believe. I am worthy simply because I am. And there's a really, really interesting, I'm gonna throw some Bible stuff at people because I love reading ancient teachings. There's a really interesting story in the Bible, call it true or not, doesn't really matter, that the Hebrew people were enslaved by the Egyptian people. And the story goes that God raised up this man called Moses, who was going to go back and rescue and pull out the Hebrew people from the Egyptian slavery. And at one point, the story goes, Moses asked God, you know, who do I say sent me? And God says, you simply say, I am. And Moses says, wait a second, though, but who do I say who sent me? And God says, you simply say, I am. And I ran onto an epiphany a few years ago about that statement, and it really taught me about self-worth. And when we're talking about depression, mental health, emotional health, I believe what that story is sharing is that it is in our existence that we find our value. It is in the I am of breathing, living, experiencing that we find our value. And so there's this magic to say in the moments that I'm depressed or dealing with PTSD or don't have a job or whatever, when we can look in the mirror and go beyond all of my circumstance, I am. And when we can look at someone else, as Dory was sharing, and when they're discovering an emotion they've never felt before, and we can create a safe space and look at them and say, you are. It's not I am enough. It's not I am happy. It's not I am sad. It's I am. And if we can find the power and the magic in looking at each other, beginning with looking at ourselves in the mirror, and then extending that invitation of existence to others, it's not going to heal things overnight. It's not going to take away the pain or the hardship. But what it is going to do is to create a safe connectivity within humanity that says, I am, and so you are. And that becomes the real invitation, whether we do it through books or through music or through coaching or through drumming or through whatever. It's the existential idea of I am. And in my darkest moments, that friends were incredibly dark, when I could at least hold on to the light that said I am, that is literally life-saving power. And so that's the conversation that I felt at 10 years old. I felt it more ever since, and I feel it more today than ever. And that's the invitation that I know we're all hoping to give to others, is that even in the moments of hopelessness, and even in the moments of great darkness, you still are here. And that's enough. That is enough. Because when you show up, something can happen. It's when we stop showing up that nothing else can happen. And so may we show up for each other and for ourselves. And that's the beauty of humanity.
Mitch, I want to thank you. Thank you for, being vulnerable and honest and disclosing all of that. Before we end the call, before we end this conversation, one of the things I also wanted to do was leave our audience, those who are watching now and those who are going to be listening globally, with things not only to think about, because we gave them that, but what can they do today, right now, as they're listening and as they're pondering what they've just heard for the past 40 minutes? What should they do? What can they do? Especially for those who are struggling emotionally, psychologically, whatever that looks like for them. Give them something powerful to take away with. And I want to start the way we started earlier. Cheyenne, can you give our audience something powerful to leave with?
Absolutely. In the class that I teach, I have 4 basic questions that I encourage people to ask themselves to help them get through some of the challenging times that they're in. And the number one thing that I found this to be true for myself, and I have found it for other people, is to take a look at and just ask yourself, regardless of where you're at and what's happening in your world right now, what difficulty, what challenge, what trauma have you already come through, or perhaps you're in the process of going through it, where you've learned something new about yourself, you've learned something new about your situation. How can you take that knowledge, that wisdom, and share it with somebody else? For me, I've encouraged people many times to write your own book, even if it's an ebook. Go out and create, some little talk that you can share in a platform like this, where you can use what you've learned to help and pay it forward to assist somebody else. That is one of the most powerful healing tools that I have found when we are feeling distressed emotionally.
Dory, any words of wisdom for those who are listening?
Sure. I usually tell people to do the following 3 things when you're feeling stressed out and, those waves of sadness and anxiety are washing over you. Take a breath, take a break, and tap out some beats, even if it's on your legs, just really fast. And just remember that you are here for a reason.
Cool.
And it's really not about you. It's about using your gifts to bless others. So try to think about what lights you up inside. What are the gifts you've been given? And how can you share those with others? And how can you help others rise up and rock so that you can too?
It seems that we've lost Jerry for some reason, maybe some technical issues. So that leaves us with Mitch. Mitch, give our audience something to take away with.
Awesome. Two things. Number one, create what I call your daily anchors. So I'll give you an example. Very early on in dealing with my darkest depression, I made a commitment to myself. Every day I'm going to get out of bed and get dressed. I'm not going to stay in bed. For me, that was a major decision to be made because I was without work, as we talked about a while ago, Cheyenne. I was really kind of aimlessly floating through life. And so I made a commitment every day I get out of bed and get dressed. Over the years, my daily anchors have evolved, like going to the gym, being physically active, reading every day, meditating every day, serving someone every day. But those anchors are really important when it comes to those moments that we're not quite sure what direction we should be heading. So create some daily anchors that you can hold to, you can make sure you take action on, and it'll give you a sense of purpose, a sense of belief, and a sense of belonging. And the second thing is ask for help. Ask for support. And this is something, it's gender neutral. We're all really bad at it as humans. Ask for support and do your best to be proactive in that, not waiting until it's potentially later than it could be. And I've put myself in both situations before where I waited too long. I should have been more proactive, but it's vulnerable and it's hard. And it's just not easy to tell someone that you're struggling with whatever that struggle is. But trust yourself, listen to your body, listen to your heart, listen to your mind, listen to your soul. They're telling you a story, share that truth. And I promise you, the support you will receive will blow your mind. So just simply ask for support.
Mitch, thank you. And I want to thank all of you once again for joining me on the first episode of the Envision Speaker Series. Quite honestly, fantastic conversation, and it's a blessing. And from a personal perspective, it's also a blessing to know each one of you individually. So thanks again. For those who are watching and listening, catch us next time on the Envision Speaker Series. Take care. The Envision Speaker Series is brought to you in part by Walking the Path, A Leader's Journey, my book. For each book purchased, 50% of the earned revenue of the book does go towards psychological and emotional services and suicide prevention. The other half of that goes to the mission that supports the Envision Speaker Series. In addition, the Envision Speaker Series is partly sponsored by the Hope Institute. The Hope Institute is a nonprofit organization here in Virginia dedicated to serving those in need by building communities around those in need. If you are making a charitable donation, know that your charitable donation is tax deductible, but please ensure that if you're directing the money to support the Envision Speaker Series, you make note of that in your donation. For all of this, I do thank you.